and welcome to another episode of 10 Feet Away from Ben Gray. I am your host, Ben Gray. Joining us for the third time is Reverend David Walters. David, thank you for coming back.
Absolutely.
This is a record. No guest has appeared on this show 3 times in a single season.
That's true. I've actually beat my own record.
You beat your own. Yes, you set the previous record of 2, which was previously broken by you in your first appearance.
I'm a record breaker.
You really are in every possible way.
In a leading edge at all times.
So we're continuing our study of James. We are in chapter 3 this week, verses 1 through 12. It's a long section, so we're not going to read all of it in one go, but please make sure that you check your materials to see the full text. First question for you, though, David. If you could erase a single slang term or phrase from the collective memory of our culture, what slang term or phrase would you erase? And I'm going to call dibs on the word baby being used by romantic couples, because it's the worst.
That is terrible.
Yes. If you use the phrase baby to refer to your significant other, you can miss me with that. Oh, you want to use miss me with that? Because that's a terrible one also.
Is that even a phrase?
It is.
That how
miss
bad?
Me with, that's how old you are.
That's how old I am. That's how out of touch I am. As much as I hate the word baby, I think that the phrase I would take out is going to have to be the poor use of the word literally.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I just cannot stand how many people...
It literally pains you.
It literally does.
I will literally try to stop doing that so much.
Thanks. From the figurative bottom of my heart.
Okay, this passage, chapter 3, verses 1 through 12, is really about words and the power of words.
Sure.
But the opening verse, not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers and sisters, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. This is more talking about the higher level of standard that we apply to teachers, and in your particular case, someone who teaches the Word of God. Can you give an example of something that pastors are scrutinized on that you'd like to see everyone held to the same standard of?
Ooh, besides just showing up for worship on Sundays, like that would be
That's
nice.
a good one. That would be a good one, yes. That everyone has that moral obligation to really actually be at church on Sundays if they're not on vacation.
It would be nice.
It would be nice.
I think that pastors are often held to a lofty standard, specifically in terms of like discipleship topics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should follow the example of the pastor and how much they pray or read the Bible or do those things. And I should do more, honestly, myself.
Well, and you've shared in the past about how if you weren't professionally obligated to pray and read the Bible as much as you do,
right,
you know you wouldn't do it as much as you do right now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so I understand where it comes from, too. The hard part for me, though, is in that question is that I actually try to lead a pretty open and honest relationship with congregants, especially, but just anybody, right? I try to be pretty transparent in my.
And you mean about your flaws as well?
Yes, specifically about my flaws, right? I mean, that's important to me because I think that I am better able to connect with people because of the fact that I'm able to engage my flaws and through them learn even openly. So if we're talking about preaching, right? I try to make it apparent that and I sin too, right? These are the things that I struggle with because I am human, like everybody else sitting in the room or at home at this point, right? And so that way I can actually have a more honest conversation. And I think that it actually allows for better relationship with a pastor too.
James spends most of this passage talking about the power of words, even going so far as to say, when we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal, or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. James is painting a very grim picture of the ability of our tongues to get us into trouble. What is it about words that are so powerful?
The way that we are able to communicate who we are is done certainly in two ways. It's done through action, but that is usually something that is done secondarily. The fastest moving thing I can do for you to tell you who I am is to speak about it, right? And there should be a trust in what I'm saying, that you're going to believe that that's who I am, that that's my identity, my personality, my whatever, the character of who I am is what you hear from me. And there are certainly those in the world in both very public and powerful positions as well as not, who are able to easily tie together falsehoods to make this picture of who they are, which is better than themselves. And it is a lot easier for me to paint that picture than it is to actually change who I am.
Okay, so James says at the very end here, out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. This should not be. What does James mean by praise and cursing? I mean, when I think of curse, as it relates to word, I think of swear words. Bad words in the English language that we're not supposed to say in polite company.
Right.
Or say at all, if you're not me.
Right.
But is that what he's referring to? And more than that, I also, when I think of cursing and blessing, I think of, the 10 Commandments of not using the Lord's name in vain. Is saying the phrase, oh my God, is that cursing? Using, a phrase like, for Christ's sake, is that cursing?
To take the Lord's name in vain would be, I think, is also the basis of why we don't curse one another. If I'm going to say that I should not take the Lord's name in vain, that means to me more that I am living out my understanding of who God is in all ways, right? So if I'm going to say that God is loving, and even love itself, then if I go out and hate people, I think that is taking the Lord's name in vain as much as anything else, right? My
Especially
action,
as a Christian.
Especially as a Christian.
As someone
if
who
I'm
claims
identifying
to be a follower of God.
Yes. Yes. And so if I am living that kind of lifestyle and yet saying, thank the Lord that I am forgiven for my sins and I am a reborn or I have salvation, and yet I go out and do all the things that are against that kind of life that we're called into, that is taking the Lord's name in vain to me.
Interesting. Okay.
That is the basis, though, for how I'm going to relate to someone else. Because if I am doing the things in my life that I am not called to do with someone else, so if I am basically lying to you or working behind your back to make your life worse, neither of those things are the ways we're supposed to love our neighbor. And I think that is a way that we curse as well, right? That is me cursing you in our relationship. And that is a basis of how we are called to be followers of God, but with one another too. Yeah.
So it's not, James isn't specifically talking about using bad words here. He's referring to words and actions being disparate, not being in alignment.
James also gets into the whole brackish water or salt water and fresh water can't come from the same place.
From the same spring, yes.
And that is our call, right? Our call is to be good forces in the world. And if we are simultaneously being destructive as well, that's the opposite of our overall call, right? But we're not perfect. And I think that's an important part of this as well. We aren't going to get it right all the time. And so when we do mess up, the power of forgiveness and the power of actual confession of that is where we make those turns in our life.
Yes.
So if I mess up and I am that negative force sometime,
which you're going to be,
which I have been,
yeah,
then I need to actually come to God and say, and also those who I've wronged.
Yes.
But I need to come and say, I am sorry and I will change my ways.
Yes.
that is how we make the world better.
But what you're saying, though, is that blessing and curse isn't saying that we're not allowed to say bad words. So I can continue to call you a
That is, I understand that in a very different way as someone in a deep relationship, a friendship with you, as opposed to you going up to some stranger and saying that.
That's true.
Right?
Yes. You're not going to punch me in the face.
No.
Immediately.
Not immediately.
At least not with the cameras on.
No. Flash to next week, get a black eye.
This has been another episode of 10 Feet Away from Ben Gray. Make sure you check out the questions that were included with this video packet, and make sure you check in next week to find out whether or not I do in fact have a black eye. Thank you again to Reverend David Walters for joining us.
Absolutely.
Have a great week. I wonder if Chewbacca is speaking English with a Wookiee accent, and we just can't understand it because we don't speak Wookiee.
With a Wookiee accent?